The observation deck of the Galactic Conservation Station orbited the gas giant Theta 7, its reinforced windows offering a panoramic view of swirling crimson storms below. Inside the climate-controlled nursery wing, Sierra adjusted the environmental controls for the third time that cycle, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface with practiced ease. The temperature needed to be exactly 15.3 degrees Celsius, the humidity at 67%, and the atmospheric pressure slightly elevated to mimic the homeworld of her newest charges. The Bracken cubs watched her from their enclosure with eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian in the dim lighting. There were 5 of them, each no larger than a Terran house cat, though their species would eventually grow to become apex predators standing 3 meters tall at the shoulder. Their midnight blue fur rippled with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with their moods, currently displaying curious yellows and cautious greens. Razor-sharp claws retracted and extended as they observed the strange bipedal creature that had been caring for them for the past standard month. Sarah had been warned, of course. Every xenobiologist at the station, every visiting researcher, every cargo hauler who passed through had the same reaction when they learned a human had volunteered for Bracken cub duty. The species was classified as Class 5 dangerous, their adult forms capable of tearing through reinforced durasteel with their bare claws. Their homeworld of Raka Prime had been devastated by stellar radiation from a nearby supernova, leaving only a handful of survivors scattered across conservation stations throughout the galaxy. The other species who worked at the station, the methodical Zenari with their 6-armed efficiency, the logical Thurin with their computational minds, the peaceful Ulmer who communicated through color-shifting skin, all of them had declined the assignment. Too dangerous, they said. Too unpredictable. The cubs were predators from birth, their instincts honed by millions of years of evolution on a world where hesitation meant death. But Sierra had simply smiled. That peculiar human expression that never quite translated properly to other species, and accepted the posting. She had grown up on the colony world of New Manitoba, where winter storms could freeze exposed flesh in minutes and summer brought swarms of insects that carried 3 different varieties of paralytic venom. Her grandmother had raised Terran wolves, her father had worked with the native Sasquatch, bear-like creatures that could crush a person's skull with a single swipe. Danger, Sarah had learned early, was relative. The first week had been tense. The cubs huddled together in the far corner of their enclosure, their bioluminescent patterns flashing aggressive reds and defensive purples whenever Sarah approached. She had kept her distance, speaking softly in a language they couldn't understand but in tones that crossed species barriers. She moved slowly, predictably, letting them grow accustomed to her presence. By the second week, they had begun to investigate. The boldest among them, a male cub Sarah had named Kiro for the clicking sound he made when curious, had crept close to the feeding station while she prepared their meals. He had watched with tilted head as she carefully portioned out the protein synthesizers and vitamin supplements, his small nostrils flaring as he processed her scent. Now, after a full month cycle, the cubs had accepted her as a fixture of their environment. Not prey, not threat, but something else entirely, something their evolutionary programming hadn't quite prepared them for. They would approach when she entered, their patterns shifting to welcoming blues and interested greens. They would play fight near her feet, their tiny growls fierce but harmless. And when feeding time came, they would line up with an almost dog-like patience that made Sierra's heart ache for the species they might never become. The cycle had been long. There had been an incident in Sector 7, a coolant leak that required all available personnel. And Sierra had been running diagnostics and coordinating repairs for 16 hours straight. The adrenaline had sustained her through the crisis, but now, in the quiet warmth of the nursery, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She settled onto the floor near the enclosure's transparent barrier, her back against the wall, intending to rest for just a moment. The cubs were fed, the environmental systems were stable, and she could afford 5 minutes before heading to her quarters. Her eyes drifted closed, her breathing slowed, and within moments she had slipped into the light sleep of someone too tired to make it to a proper bed. The cubs noticed immediately. Their patterns flickered with confusion, shifting through questioning oranges and uncertain yellows. They had never seen the human still before, never seen her vulnerable. Their instincts pulled in multiple directions. This was prey behavior, the stillness of something weak. But this was also their caregiver, the provider of food and comfort and security. Kiro approached the barrier first, pressing his small face against the transparent material. He clicked softly, that curious sound that had earned him his name. When Sarah didn't respond, he looked back at his siblings, his patterns swirling with decision-making blues. The barrier wasn't locked. It was never locked when Sarah was in the room, a calculated risk she had taken to build trust. The failsafes would activate if the cubs tried to leave the nursery entirely, but within this space they had freedom. Kiro pushed through the environmental seal, feeling the slight shift in temperature as he crossed from enclosure to observation deck. His siblings watched with wide eyes as he padded across the floor, his movements cautious, his claws retracted. He approached the sleeping human, circling once, twice, processing the rise and fall of her chest, the warmth radiating from her body. Then, with a decision that would be studied by xenobiologists for decades to come, Kiro climbed. His claws found purchase in the fabric of Sarah's uniform, careful not to pierce skin. He scaled her leg, her hip, her torso, until he reached her shoulder. There, in the space between her neck and arm, he found a spot that was warm and soft and stable. He circled once, as his ancestors had done in dens on Vraka Prime, and settled down with a contented rumble that vibrated through Sierra's unconscious form. His bioluminescent patterns faded to the deep purple of contentment and safety, and within moments he too was asleep. Behind the barrier, the other cubs watched. One by one, emboldened by Kiro's example, they pushed through the seal. They approached the sleeping human with less caution than their brother had shown, their trust already established. They climbed, finding spaces against her legs, curled in her lap, nestled against her side. When the security officer made her rounds an hour later, she found a scene that would become legendary throughout the station. The human xenobiologist, still asleep, covered in Class 5 predator cubs who slept peacefully against her warmth. The officer's mandibles clicked in amazement as she carefully recorded the moment. Later, when Sierra woke to find herself buried in purring, luminescent cubs, she would laugh. That peculiar human sound that the cubs had come to associate with joy and safety. She would carefully extract herself without waking them, would document the behavioral breakthrough, would file reports that would change conservation protocols across the galaxy. But in that moment, predator and human slept together in perfect trust, a testament to something the galaxy was still learning about humans. They were neither the strongest species nor the smartest, but they had something else, something that couldn't be quantified or replicated. They had the ability to look at the most dangerous creatures in the universe and see not threats, but children in need of care. That more than any weapon or technology was what made humanity remarkable among the stars.